Okay, so technology, like the father was with me online Thursday night, and I don't know, it was like you can prepare so much and then something happens. So we're doing our best. I'm gonna get all flustered. I don't really like I don't spend most of my day on online and on my computer, luckily anymore. So I just want to put that out there that I don't know, there could always be a snafu at the last minute, even though I prepare and I prepare. So just we're gonna let go of any of that and not have any like kerfuffled feelings about it. And I'm probably just speaking to myself. But today we're going to do an introduction. I have like two screens. That's why I'm looking over here. And also I'm going to show you some videos, some clips. And today's kind of like a really fun session. We're doing introduction. And I'm going to also share with you some of like the housekeeping. And so let's get into it here. I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully, and I practice, I promise. I practice. Okay. All right. Okay. I know what I need to do here. Where I do that. I'm going to, okay. So it's already sharing from there. Cool. All right. So do you see a screen that says Bee Guardian Apprenticeship? Hooray. La la la. Okay, cool. And I think that I'll just go like that. Okay, fabulous. If at any time you can't see anything, if the slides aren't moving, if you can't hear me, please let me know. Okay, so we are Sun and Bloom Farms, and this is the Bee Guardian Apprenticeship. I'm Anna Maria, and what are we going to discuss in this course? So yes, this is a 9-month journey, as I was talking about in email, and after I wrote that email last night, I realized that like also pregnancy is 9 months, and so I suppose subconsciously I selected 9 months for that reason, and it also really allows us to follow the seasons in a really beautiful way. I have taken quite a few introductory beekeeping classes and trainings and weekend intensives and what have you. And the first time I offered this in an extended setting was when we were still living in Southern California. We were in San Clemente, and we were meeting in person every month. And I think that was about 6 months that we did that. And it just felt so amazing to have this opportunity to come together all the time. And as the seasons were changing, the bees changed, and my students had different questions and different things that were happening inside the hive, and we were able to work on it together. So that's again why I chose that. And as you probably saw on the website, the topics for this course, we're going to talk about history, folklore, traditions, mythology, feminine archetypes, which I'm going to make a note because I need to tell you something about that later. And of course, like basics, biology, terminology used in the bee world, swarm captures, lures, equipment and tools, different hive designs. How will you start a hive? Selecting and preparing your apiary site, installing a new hive, honeybee roles, duties, the internal life cycle, and the maintenance, performing inspections with care, healthy hive indicators, record keeping, seasonal tasks, and things like BTs, which all of you are going to be very excited about as herbalists. Honey and beeswax, when we responsibly harvest, how to harvest, how do we render wax, how do we create value-added products, which some of you may have already started doing that. As bee guardians, we are also concerned with activism and the environment, researching local city restrictions, beekeepers clubs, pollinator garden design, habitat restoration, native bee hotels, and tree hives. Towards the middle of summer, we'll talk about advanced techniques, splitting the hives, identifying disease, should you feed or not, varroa mite, and those treatment options. And I've added these new modules focused on herbalism because I guess I knew that all of you were going to be coming to this class and all of you were herbalists. And I myself have, been working with plants for a long time. And really, I really wanted to give this like really special spot in the space of the course for us to dive into the hive medicine. And then we're going to have these seasonal celebrations online, of course, but to come together in circle and have some intention around the shifting of the seasons. So I'm very excited for that. This is, I guess, blurry for you, but this is also on the website. This is also going to be in a place that you can access it again. And this is our schedule. As you can see, it's twice a month, sometimes once a month. For example, April and July are once a month. The rest of them are twice a month. And I also want to draw your attention to October. I put in-person gathering. So obviously we have some international people here, and we can discuss this collectively, but my dream is to have all of you here on the land in October, if it's feasible. It's not mandatory, but it would be pretty epic if we could conclude our time together in person. So let's continue that conversation. And early October is ideal. Later October gets pretty cold. But early October is like gorgeous. And also things like ticks are not as much around. I don't know if you guys have ticks wherever you are, but October is a really nice time. And even if we decide, if we do decide to come together, we could host it on that weekend of October 7th, which is our kind of like our graduation. So something to think about. I'll check in with you probably in the next session to see if you feel like it's feasible. You don't have to answer now. If there's any questions on that, I can answer them now if you have them. Okay. So just something else to draw your attention to: February, May, August, we have 3 sessions around herbalism and hive medicine. And then we have the spring equinox, summer solstice, and fall equinox celebrations. And those sessions are only an hour and a half. We may go over, but, and they're also on Sundays. So make sure that you take note of that. And it's not like a Saturday. So those are the only differences. So in the past, I've used Google Drive as a way to share information with you. And I think I'm going to continue to do that. Does anyone have any issues with Google Drive or does not like it? Okay, great. The other thing that I would like to welcome all of you, has anyone used Slack? And I don't know, is it available in Canada? I hope so. I don't know. It is? Okay. If we use Slack, then we can have a channel that we can continue to talk to each other and share resources, photos, things like that. In the past, I've used a Facebook group, but I am not really in favor of that anymore for various reasons. So if we're all okay with Slack, then I will invite you to a channel and we can, it's really fun. You can have it on your phone as an app and super easy to, if you snap a photo of a bee or a calendula or whatever it is, you can easily upload it. You can easily tag and attach resources. You can also connect Google Drive to it so you can share information. I can, send a resource to you and say, hey, it's going to be in the Google Drive. So I think that's going to be the best way for us to stay connected. And I will invite you to all of that probably this coming week. But in the Google Drive, you will find class recordings for each session. The Zoom link will always be there in case you lose it. And then in the past, I've had it broken up by kind of like topic, but I think I'm going to have the folders by session this time so that you can easily go back. And there might be some additional folders like honey, beeswax, value added. I might keep that. Every year it shifts and changes. So I like to feel from the group first in what direction to go in. Okay, so we've been together for 50 minutes. I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes and then we'll take a break. Use the restroom and I might need to go feed the baby and get some more tea. So for now, let's start with our some storytelling. Well, I guess I can do this. I didn't really talk about myself, so I'll do that, I guess. I am originally from Reno, Nevada, which is a high mountain area, a high mountain town. And so I'm also deeply drawn to the mountains. But I found my way to Southern California shortly after I decided to stop pursuing medical school and go for agriculture. I can expand upon that later, but I bring it up only because I've always had a deep desire to learn about healing and what did healing mean. And I, as a young person, always wanted to just help people. And when I started to learn about like, what does it mean to be a doctor, I knew only in that time and space that the way that I could probably facilitate healing and helping people was through medicine. Both sides of my family, there's actually a lot of mysticism and a lot of living off the land. My dad is from Greece and my mother's family is from Italy. And so I'm not that far removed from those generations that were deeply rooted in nature and living in harmony. But as a child of immigrant families, immigrant parents, they wanted me to really just be immersed in what America could offer, right? And so they pushed me to go to medical school. And I worked my ass off. Like I worked really hard. And there wasn't anything necessarily wrong with my application. I did all the things I was supposed to. I had good scores, but I didn't get in. I tried twice. I took the MCAT twice. I didn't get in. So I was like, obviously having a total life crisis. And I happened to get a job working at a camp that had this huge citrus orchard. and a struggling garden, and we needed someone to take care of it and to create curriculum for the kids that would come through and visit. And from there, that is how I said, see you later, medical school and Western medicine, and found my way to the bees and to herbalism and real healing. So I really thank, Spirit and all the angels that were helping me make that decision. Because if I was a doctor today, I'd probably be having another crisis. So that is like kind of like that was the big trajectory for me. And that was over 10 years. I don't know, almost 15 years now. So anyway, now I'm a mother, as I mentioned, and I'm just like my work in the last 10 years is really deeply entrenched in growing food, bringing community together, teaching people how to do all of those things in the same time. Teaching people how to work with bees, how to work with plants, how to be in community, how to source food. So I feel really lucky, and I'm very grateful that I was able to find my way. And now we move forward, and I'll show you a video in a minute. But when we left Southern California, not actually left Southern California, we left our coastal, urban, suburban life, where we did have an urban farm, my partner and I, and we found this amazing property 2 hours east, past Temecula. And we were in the high desert, and I felt at home, and it was just really magical. We had burrowing owls living on our property, coyotes coming through. It was just absolutely stunning. And even though it was in the middle of cannabis country, this particular area, and this town sits right, like on the other side of that trailer was an entrance into the national park, which is absolutely stunning. But this whole town is now like this cannabis operation for different private landowners. But it was so magical. And my son was born there, my first son, and we just really felt like, okay, this is our life. We get to grow food, we get to teach people. It was really beautiful. We bought our first Nigerian dwarf goats. We had about 20 chickens there. We did a million things wrong. We did some things right, and I had bees there, and it was stunning. So anyway, why aren't we there anymore? Well, because that land was a lease, and out of nowhere, the owner was like, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. And he was a family friend, and it just was heartbreaking. We put a lot of time and money and effort, and so we had to leave. And this was also during the time when it just happened, right? Like those same week, people started talking about COVID, and we could, of course, not afford anything in California. So my husband's dad is adopted father is from Missouri. So he said, why don't you check out Missouri? And I was completely not okay with that. But here we are. We came to visit, and we found ourselves a really beautiful property. And so we're here in Missouri. We're in a town called Lebanon, and we have about 70 acres. And this little market garden was our first year 3 summers ago. Oh my gosh, and it still says Midwest Bloom. That was the first name, but it's actually Sun and Bloom. And so we do permaculture training, obviously bee training, herbalism. We're growing for the market. And, we're still beginning farmers. We're still like figuring out in what direction we want to go and expand. But what we are actively doing is creating a village in which people are going to buy plots and come live with us and live in community and contribute to the enterprises that will support the village. So that's us. And there's this funny little video I'm going to show with you, share with you, that my friends did with me a long time ago. Let's see. And hopefully I can figure out how to do this. And share the sound. All right. Can you see something that says Vimeo? Cool, thanks.
Save the Bees campaign, another and dirty, doing the asking else to jump so much more than a sticker. This is our food, and this is our earth, and we can only do this together. I'm Anna Maria, and I am a farmer, an herbalist, a beekeeper, and I am a steward of this earth. So part of my job is saving and rescuing bees. A lot of the time, people call exterminators to remove hives from their property. And here in Orange County, there's probably 20 to 30 exterminators, and myself and maybe 2 other people that I know of that save hives. So we're kind of on a really serious mission here. Today we're in San Clemente, and there's a hive here in an irrigation box, which is one of their favorite spots. It's really enclosed and protected, really unassuming most of the time. To put it simply, bees are mandatory for our survival, for our food, for our medicine, and for our environment. If you walked into a grocery store and there weren't any honeybees, you would walk into a produce department that was either a third to half empty. That's the measure and scale of how important bees are to our food system. You can tell if the hive was like aggressive or Africanized, they would be all over me right now. We didn't need to use any smoke.
Memories. So there was a time where I was working on bees, doing all those removals and rescues, like outside of a full-time job at a nonprofit. And it was amazing though. Like I got to meet so many people all over Southern California. And, I would start my day sometimes at 5 a.m. to go get a hive and then change, put the bees in the apiary, make my way to my nonprofit job by 9 o'clock, and then go get another hive in the afternoon. It was just like so much fun. And my friend did this cute video for me that I was going to launch this like a crowdfunding campaign for my project then. But anyway, I still like to look back at those moments and just really like loved all that time that I put into that. So let's talk about let's continue to make our way through here. Okay, so who is the honeybee? And the thought, like, not everything I'm going to do today you already saw, but there are some things that you saw the other night. But the honeybee is this incredible being that obviously we all know about. And it actually has its first ancestor during the time of the dinosaurs, or millions of years ago. And we know this by this, little artifact, this evidence of this fossil of a bee-like creature. And have any of you read Botany of Desire by Michael Pollan? No? Okay, I recommend that you put it on your reading list. Botany of Desire describes how plants have actually changed over time to be more attractive to us and to the insect world and pollinators in general. It didn't always used to be that plants were reproducing through pollination by some organism. Actually, the early plants, the ancestors of the plants that we know today, were relying on the wind for pollination and for reproduction. Of course, there were some that do by rhizomes and roots in the soil, but in general, there was the wind pollination. But the intelligence of plants actually is pretty profound, as we know as herbalists. And again, this book describes, he follows about 4 plants and goes through the history of that plant. And apples, for example, the original apple didn't really have a lot of fruit on it, but actually learned from its environment that if it created a flower that was with color and then eventually had nectar that was super sweet, that pollinators would be attracted to the flower. And it could then create a larger fruit, which had larger seeds, so that the plant could then reproduce. So it is really a beautiful book to read because you are viewing the world from the plant's perspective. And it's incredible to think that plants are, I don't want to say manipulating us, but they totally have. And this is also true when we talk about medicinal plants. I'm glad that all of you are herbalists because I get to do these tangents. But this is true also for the medicinal plants that we are working with and that we come in contact with, that the properties of plants in the medicinal side as well have also changed to be more enticing to humans. And what would be the reason for that? Well, if we love the plants, if we're like a tribe in the Amazon or a desert people, whatever it is, if we take care of this plant, then we ensure that the plant is going to survive even more. And so the plant responds then by making it more favorable for the human. So the bee or the pollinator and plants obviously have had this relationship for millions of years. And eventually over time, just the bee evolved to have these characteristics, and the plant evolved to have enticing profiles. So that's how it came to be. And we're going to spend just a little bit of time getting to know some of these other bees that are in the world. There are about 7 major families of bees, and like family, then within that family there's all these subspecies that we're going to discuss. But when we look at the characteristics of these bees in different regions, we practice also observing that each one has certain characteristics to be adapted to its environment. So Apis dorsata, for example, is considered a giant honeybee. It has common open air nests, an open air nest meaning it's hanging on the branch. Doesn't have any like protection, or it also doesn't inhabit an enclosed space like a tree trunk. It's not a domesticated bee like the bees that we know of in our country here. and it's giant. It's pretty large. You'll find this bee in Southeast Asia, and they are wild. However, there are folks that can lure these bees to create more hives in areas of agriculture. And they pollinate things like cotton, mango, coconut, coffee, pepper, starfruit, and macadamia. So this hive, if you look at this picture, is pretty incredible to see how massive that comb is. And most often, these indigenous tribes of all different regions didn't just use the hive for honey. They were also enjoying the pollen, the brood, which is all the larvae, and the honey to supplement their diet. Apis cerana is this, and I will pause here, that you can either unmute yourself and interrupt me, or you can raise your hand. If you have to ask me a question, you're more than welcome, or make a comment. Apis cerana is also another Asia bee. And this one is interesting because it lives in some higher elevations and also can endure long periods of rainfall, which we know there's a lot of rainforest and a temperate forest there. So this particular bee nests inside cavities, as this person here is taking out one of the combs. And again, this is not necessarily a domesticated bee. This is one that exists in the wild, but of course, humans have probably found ways to lure it into different areas. Apis laboriosa is another amazing bee to learn about. This is also a giant honeybee. It has open air nests, like you see here, not domesticated. This bee is at very high altitude, and it's famous for its qualities in that the bees forage on a rhododendron flower, which creates a hallucinogenic honey. And this honey is an important component to the people that are indigenous of this area to use it in ceremony and to also use it in their medicinal practices. And I have a video that I want to share with you about this.
Anna Maria, have you ever tried the honey?
I have tried to get my hands on it and I can't. It's actually illegal to bring it to the country. So you either have to be really sneaky about it or you have to be there to try it. Yeah, I really want to though. Okay, this is 9 minutes, but it's really worth it. This is going to, so this is called The Last Honey Hunter. It's a documentary. I encourage you to watch the full thing. The Last Honey Hunter. And this is about a few guys who are climbing experts, somehow found their way to, befriend the people of this area. And they're doing this video based upon one of the last men that has been trained and also initiated into this lineage of harvesting this honey. It's extremely special because there's only certain men that can do it, and you have to do it in only with the certain approval from either the elders. And also there's a whole ritual and ceremony around it. At one point in the video, is anyone here vegan or vegetarian? Okay. At one point, I'm asking because in one point of the video, they're talking about how they offer a sacrifice of a chicken. And so there's a very quick shot of a chicken head, and I don't want anyone to be like scared or offended. So I just want to present that up front. But this video always makes me cry, and not that you have to, but let's see, I need to go back here.
The last honey hunter.
Yes.
I'm Renan. I'm a filmmaker and a climber. I've been coming to Nepal for about 15 years, mostly to climb in the high Himalaya. This time we set out to explore a lesser-known culture, those who aren't in the limelight of Mount Everest, and whose way of life is under threat of disappearing.
Molly and I counted today 14 beehives, most of which are like 6 feet in diameter.
Somehow it's been arranged that I am going down onto the cliff on a rope to do some filming, which is not really my forte.
The honey hunters harvest a hallucinogenic honey off the cliff faces in this region, but it's not going to last forever. And we heard that this might be the last honey harvest ever to happen.
This story is solid gold, and I'm super lucky to be the writer on this because it's really easy to be the writer compared to being Renan.
Normally I'm the one struggling with a video camera, but on this project, I got the opportunity to shoot my first stills assignment.
Super intense. It's hard having no idea what's going on and just trying to respect everything they're doing and know that it has a purpose greater than us.
The greater meaning, the thing that we so desperately did not want to fail in documenting, was the story of Malay, the last person in this region who can still harvest the honey. The problem was how we were going to get the shots we need without disrespecting the local culture, hurting or harming Malay. We usually don't just spin a globe and point our finger when finding new places to explore. Most often it comes from some kind of a personal connection, like our friend Ben Ayers had for this village.
Cool, Yomanti. Cool. More.
To get to the cliffs, we left the comfort of the village and hiked 12 miles deep into the jungle. They showed us what was going to hold our body weight and we could pull on in this steep jungle terrain.
These guys are like the ultimate survivors. So stick with them, don't wander off on your own, and you'll be fine.
Must have been a leech.
Around grape-sized hail balls.
After a shamanic ceremony and spilling the blood of a few sacrificial chickens, the forest spirits were ready to accept us onto their cliffs. Or so we hoped.
going to be like one of the most interesting days of all of our lives today. So I'm excited. I have to say I'm a little nervous.
What kind of a knot is that?
No idea.
We call ourselves professional climbers, but we couldn't even follow them up the steep jungle cliffs. So they put our ropes up for us, tied by mysterious knots onto tiny shrubs and tree roots.
Yeah, there's a little twinge of nervousness inside of me. I've never done anything like this before.
Okay, we're clear. Drop it clear.
They're looking at us, thinking our gear is crazy.
I'm going down into space.
And we're looking at them, thinking the same thing, with their hand-woven bamboo ropes.
Just be careful, man. Don't, like, knock them off.
When we finally went down onto the cliff, it was so overhanging that we were just spinning in space, unable to stabilize. It was impossible to get a shot. We were only facing the action for 10 seconds out of each 1-minute rotation. Eventually, we figured out that hanging 2 people in space was the way to go, using one person as ballast to kick off of.
This is the most out of control yet.
I'm getting stuck through the space. I just got stung in the cheek, right through the hood.
We found out that these Himalayan honeybees, the largest in the world, could sting through our American bee suits. We came down and tried to add more clothing under our suits, but even that didn't help.
This guy tore something on my groin.
You're in the bee suit, and you look at him, and you see the bees all over them. You can see that they're stinging all over your bee suit, and you think, they're eating the guy alive. You gotta be kidding me. He's free soloing right now.
Despite all the challenges we faced, we still had all of our ultra-modern equipment. Melodon didn't have any of that. He believed in the protection of something I'll never understand.
Anytime when you felt a little overwhelmed, you just looked at Malay without the bee suit on the bamboo ladder with no harness.
The bounty from the harvest is used for its medicinal properties and to sell to support the community.
And this film's been like a 10-year dream. I've known Malidon for that long, and I had tears in my eyes. And I just feel so lucky to be able to do this.
Does anyone have anything they want to share? Any reflections, reactions to that? before I dive into my little.
I mean, that was just pretty epic to like watch him up there with no harness, just on the bamboo ladder, like no gear on hardly. It's, yeah, just amazing.
Yeah.
Have you all watched
I
the
wonder if
documentary about the Turkish woman, the beekeeper in Turkey? I can't remember what it was called.
Yes, I was gonna show a clip of it at the end. Yes. It's called Honeyland. But we'll watch
Honeyland,
the clip
yes.
together. Yeah. Veronica, what were you gonna say?
it was just kind of a funny thing, but kind of serious. Like, I wonder if the fact that it's, medicinal and hallucinogenic kind of helps them through that pathway, because if you didn't have some kind of, thing that you trust beyond, like what he was saying, he didn't understand what he trusted, but surrendered to and have the support of the medicine, like how could most people get through that kind of journey, And I think from the lens of someone who's like a tourist / adventurer, it's really beautiful to see how he's highlighting a dying tradition for that tribe and that community. I think I'm so grateful he did that and to teach us about it. The last thing that's kind of lighthearted that I thought of is that I wonder if those are the honeybees that are in the Jungle Book that Baloo and Mowgli are climbing to eat. Maybe not those ones, but the other giant honey.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I always get so emotional when I see this. There's a lot of things that come up for me, and one of them, the most obvious, is this like beautiful and sacred relationship between humans and bees for so long, and in so many different parts of the world, like bees have been at the center of their ceremonies, their traditions, their medicine, even in their religion, so to speak, like whatever spirituality they practice, there was so many goddesses that were represented by the bee, and this kind of imagery in the video that we see of Mowgli, like this innate knowing and trusting in the bee and in the jungle, right? In the spirits that are surrounding him. It's so beautiful to witness that, because obviously in our modern day world, we are so disconnected from that magic every day. And then for me, like, I also have this other, like, almost like this heartbreak feeling that we want to know so much about the sacredness, but then there's also this like modern energy that's trying to like learn and extract and capture, and it's fascinating to see this dichotomy of like all of the technology in this sacred space. It's almost like heartbreaking for me at the same time. And so I feel like in our bee journey, so much of what we come to, these junctures in our journey of how much of the modernity is needed, and how much do we want to like implement in our practice and in our relationship. Natural beekeeping is really an approach that tries to, it is encouraging the bee to like have its own autonomy and to have its own expression, and to allow the sacredness of its being to be there and to be witnessed. And for us to cultivate a sacred relationship so that we can receive the gift of medicine of the hive, and also, provide a way that we can support them in return. I don't know. I just feel there's so much emotion and so much magic for all of these thousands of years that people have been in awe and in service to the hive. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that.
It's interesting too how when the adventurers and stuff, and they're going down, they're spinning all around, they're getting stung through their suits and all of these things. It's like they were being like pushed out, like the energy was pushing them away. Like you're not connected here. You're trying to kind of intrude on this, sacred area and what we're doing here.
Yeah, exactly. And that we're going to talk a lot about that. I mean, it is like agriculture and it's technology and it's extractions and when you're a beekeeper and you go into the hive with that mindset, you're just like wanting to get work done, you want to get the honey out, that you will always be covered in stings and you will always be met with the energy of like no. And so yeah, it's very powerful when we have the moment to like witness and to listen and to be quiet. So I'm glad you're work. Yes. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, like, I don't even know if they would know the answer, but like there was like a piece of that too that I just was curious, like, that I don't know if they did it for dramatic effect. I'm assuming they didn't because they seem like really good people, but like they were saying this might be the last, like, this last harvest, the last that it is, which like, is there any like way that we would know if they picked maybe like a young boy to then get trained, or?
I don't know if we would know unless they went back, and I haven't followed up on it recently. We could look into it, but I think that it's been a while since I watched the full documentary, but from what I initially learned about is that with like the modernity making its way even into these, indigenous tribes deep in the forest or deep in the rainforest, the traditions and the ceremonies and all of that starts to like break away a little bit. Here's an example. I saw on Instagram the other day a profile pop up in my feed, and it was about a project that this group of engineers created this cylinder that you fill up with water, and it's with salt water, and it creates a chemical reaction, and it gives light for 45 days. And they were saying that they developed this product for a small tribe in a desert region, and I'm trying to think of where exactly it was, but at any rate, part of the amazing wow factor of this product was so that the people of this small tribe in the desert somewhere could charge their cell phones. That was like part of like they get this electricity, they get this power so that they can charge their phone, in addition to having light and not having to go, I don't know, do it manually or something. And so it's happening everywhere where these lineages are losing these opportunities to hold on to that, sacred tradition. And the story I think about this man is that some of the younger generations are not interested in doing this anymore. They're moving out of the village or out of the rainforest or wherever it is, out of the desert tribe. They're not really interested in participating in these things anymore. So they're making their way like to the city or whatever.
Which is like so universal across the board in like so many communities from the north to like the jungle, right? Like it's just common. And what you said earlier, my husband's sister always says, like, most evil is done with good intention. Like, and she just it's one of her catchphrases, you know, like she constantly says it, applies it to pretty much everything from parenting to, like, you know, modernity and medicine a lot, with her beliefs around. But anyway, it just popped to mind when you said that. And also, like, it's tricky. Like, there was a camp I participated in when I was in my early 20s called Rediscovery. And my mom had been part of, like, sort of the thinkers up in Haida Gwaii. I don't know if you're familiar with the west coast of British Columbia, but there's an area, Haida Gwaii, the Queen Charlotte Islands, they used to be called. And they had there was a man by the name of Tom Huckleberry who wanted to, like, preserve the Indigenous traditions. So he was a white man, but he had this idea and then started working with the elders, and then they created these camps, and then he started creating some in Thailand as well. And I think there may be some in Australia, where they basically bring Indigenous youth to be trained in the old ways by the elders. So he kind of facilitated that. And I was, like, really lucky to be one of 2 white kids to go and be trained at one of these camps. I went because, well, my mom was good friends, and I was raised in going to Haida Gwaii a lot. She was actually adopted as an honorary elder when before I was born. So we had a lot of connections there. But it was very interesting to me because there was just in this incredible depth of wisdom. And yet it felt like now, for example, Huckleberry's, he's like, his work, he did this incredible work to set these things up, but there's still like this, like, disconnect where it's this white man facilitating, right? So he's been actually, like, he's got communities he's very connected to, but there's also this backlash, not usually from the Indigenous communities themselves, but more this sort of, I don't know what the right word, woke culture, what's going on, where he's being ostracized. And it's just this really, really complex, like, thing, because, like, there's so many layers to it. Because I agree with kind of what your assessment of watching that video and being kind of like, it almost feels like inappropriate to be there, right? And I can, yeah, I'm kind of speaking to think, but anyway, I just felt like sharing that piece, and I want to explore that a bit more further along as we, go through this process, I guess, because I think there's 2 things there that need to be healed. I think we have those feelings sometimes with nature itself, where we feel like we don't belong, and yet there's some healing there where we do, where we're in this reciprocal relationship with nature, where we feel alienated and in ways that isn't the stewards. Do you know what I'm trying to get at here? So there's healing layers there. I'm gonna stop talking.
Absolutely. And I think all of us are here, all of you and myself and all the other students that I've ever had in this program make their way to this because they're trying to remember, and they're trying to find that avenue of connection. And for some of us, like, we did have ancestors that were, within a few generations in living off the land or working with animals or whatever it is. And for some other people, it might be a little bit further back in their lineage, but it's there. And 100% we're at this, like, point of how can we reconnect and remember in a way that is respecting history and respecting also, like, the lineage. And how can we do it in a way where we get to see documentaries and do it in a way that's supportive to the people, not extractionary, not in another extractionary thing, right? So yeah, this is it is a topic. This theme comes up a lot when you're working with bees, and I am glad that we get to have this conversation together. Okay, let me go back to my window here. So this little bee, Apis florea, is a red dwarf honeybee, and you can find this often in Thailand and Cambodia. they have this shimmering defense mechanism, which is really incredible to see. And I'll send you another video link to watch it on your own. But they only create this one little hive or one little piece of, comb, and it's just about this big. It's very sweet. So then we get to Apis mellifera, Linnaeus, which is like the big family of all the European honeybees. And there's also included in that is Africa, Western Asia, Middle East, and Europe. So this is the big family, the one that all of us are most likely going to be working with in some way. And so the honeybees that we know on this continent, in the United States, for example, North America, they are not from here. They were brought here to pollinate and support the expansion of agriculture that was happening here at that time. Okay. So before we jump into that, I'm going to have us take a break for about, let's see, it's 1:40 my time. Let's come back in about 10 minutes, 10 or 15 minutes. Let's do 15 just in case I need a little bit more time for baby. And go ahead and get yourself some tea, a snack. After that, we have another hour and 10 minutes or so of class. Okay, sound good? Awesome, thank you. Okay. Thank you for helping me out with that break. Able to get the baby to sleep. Success. All right. Let me jump back in here. Okay, you can see my screen, yes? Presentation. Thank you. So, as I mentioned, this family, Apis mellifera linnaeus, encompasses many different subspecies, and we're not going to talk all about all of them, but I'm going to highlight a few. Apis mellifera lamarcki is one that was indigenous to Egypt and that region there. I don't know extensively how far, but this one is pretty special because it's one of the earliest documentations that we have of bees being somewhat domesticated in the sense. And there's an amazing book called The Tears of Ra. This is also on the slide that I have at the end for you. And we can see in many different drawings and paintings and hieroglyphics, pottery, that bees were a very important part of the culture at that time. And of course, deities attached to the likeness of the honeybee in Egyptian culture as well. The god Ra wept, and the tears from his eyes fell upon the ground and turned into a bee. The bee made his honeycomb and busied himself with the flowers of every plant, and so wax was made and also honey out of the tears of Ra. There's a deep, extensive history about Egyptians and bees, some of which we'll talk a little bit about. And it's just really beautiful because we see some of these first inscriptions and writings and documentations of how honey was used. And we know that they were making mead, actually. Egyptians were also really noted for doing things with fermentation. And I have this awesome memory that I worked with a beer brewer once, and he did this special project where he was able to locate a specific type of grain, a wheat, that was grown in Egypt. And someone had been saving the seeds for a very long time, and someone was also growing these seeds. And this heritage wheat was like isolated in this particular spot. I don't recall where, but he got his hands on some of it and made this special batch of beer. And he also, from there, did another fermentation process with honey and made something like a honey beer kind of concoction. And it was just really amazing. And he happened to partner with our local museum and someone who was well-versed in Egyptian culture and history. And it was just like this full experience. And we also know that the Egyptians were storing honey in their tombs alongside with, the kings and queens of that time. And you may have heard that honey was found in one of those tombs in perfect condition because it was in a proper vessel. Honey doesn't go bad when you store it properly. And the domestication that they had started was this bottom middle photo that looks like a wall. Those are actually all little hives. They created this cylindrical shape and stacked it on top of each other, and they were keeping bees in there. And we also know from the greats like Cleopatra, how incredible honey was for our skin. And she was obviously one of the first to use it in the beauty sense, which we're going to talk about honey later on and its medicinal properties and have some fun with that. But truly such a beautiful investigation into history. Apis mellifera cecropia is of my people, the bees that were around the Greeks. And we're going to talk more about, who these amazing women are. These are the Melissa. These are priestesses of the bees that were found in Crete and northern Greece. We're going to talk about them. But you'll see some of the containers that the Greeks worked with bees in. The bottom right photo shows a skep, which is a basket usually where you keep bees. It's either covered in mud or clay. And then that center photo are the old smokers that they used, made out of clay. The top center photo is another horizontal hive, probably taking inspiration from the Egyptians. And then that other top left photo is another clay hive, essentially. It looks like a planter for a plant, but it was turned over to keep the bees in. And then, of course, the European species are, what we're all most familiar with. And there's so much history that is around all of Europe. Has each culture has their own kind of stories around the bees. The mellifera, Apis mellifera, is usually found in Scandinavia, UK, Germany. The linguistica is what you'll work with if you get your hands on Italian bees. They're the most domesticated species. The Carnica or Carnolian is more indigenous to Eastern Europe. So each of these have, some differences. All of them are, working inside of a hive, collecting nectar, making honey, all the things. But there are some different adaptations, obviously, to their morphology, their coloring, their size, even to make it more specific to their area. And one of the most significant things that comes out of the history of European beekeeping is that we learn about the telling of the bees, and this is a practice that was documented by a lot of paintings and books and old writings, where the hive was an integral part of the family, not just a means for getting honey, but they actually considered it like a family member. And these pictures are showing people speaking with the bees, often telling them their worries or their celebratory things, like someone was born. It was also practiced if the head beekeeper of the family died, then they would tell the bees first. So it's a lot of history, and we're going to, throughout the course, take these morsels from different cultures and learn more about them. And then as you start to think about what kind of design in the hive, for a hive that you want to take on, there's obviously many to choose from that we'll cover. The center, top left is pretty classic, rectangular square shaped box that most hobby beekeepers have. And then the other three photos are showing some more of these European designs that are pretty old and still used today. And we're going to talk more about that. The honey, let's see, the African killer bee, I don't think I'm going to talk about that one right now. We'll save it for another time. And then Melipona bee, we'll also talk about it another time. So okay, what do bees do? I mean, I think a lot of you, all of you probably know what is their importance, but they really are a indicator of the health of an environment. And obviously plants rely on pollinators to move pollen from one plant to another for procreation and reproduction. And then, of course, in our agricultural system, there are thousands of crops that rely on honeybees for pollination, as I mentioned in that video. And possibly, like, maybe you learned about bees and their importance from hearing about pollination, or maybe you haven't. Maybe you haven't learned about what happens in agriculture, in our mass, scale agriculture. But basically, thousands of bees are moved across our country every day, United States and internationally. There it also happens, but bees are moved every month to pollinate different crops that are in season. And there are a lot of reasons why this is not working. And we have given this term colony collapse to kind of describe the reason why thousands of bees are dying every year. And the colony collapse really encompasses so much. It takes into account that bees are exposed to pesticides and herbicides when they're foraging in orchards. Bees are fed sugar water instead of allowing them to eat the honey that they've created. They're given antibiotics, and their hives are sprayed with chemicals to kill pathogens and diseases. And when I talk about this, I often describe it as the health of humanity in terms of humans worldwide could be considered not great. Many people are suffering with a lot of illness or disease. And you could also very easily say that modern, medicine is constantly pushing prescriptions and pills and, that kind of approach, savior kind of approach to medicine, while the environment is being sprayed with pesticides and we have toxins around us. And there's no wonder, like, there's so many people suffering with illness. And so the same goes for the bees. And this is just like a hyper concentrated example where you have this tiny creature, you expect it to move around the country every month. There's no rootedness in its hive. It's often, smushed on trucks with thousands of other hives. It's not allowed to eat honey because the honey is extracted to be sold. It's given sugar water instead to eat, and then exposed to really terrible pathogens and toxins in the environment. And so this is a huge problem. And folks, come to me sometimes that they want to get into beekeeping because they want to save the bees and they want to be part of the solution. And this is, my response to that is we don't need more beekeepers necessarily. We need more people who understand the complexities of agriculture and people who are advocating for their families and their community for clean and nourishing food, so that we move away from this model of monoculture, monocropping, and look towards regenerative agriculture. This is like really the answer. And for you as a beginning beekeeper or in your early years, yes, like we want you to have this deep relationship with the hive, but we also need you to be out there in the world doing something about the way your food is grown and educating those around you to care about how it's grown and to, reach out to farmers who are growing in the right way and support those farmers as much as we can, of course, financially and where we are in our physical space. But, as I mentioned in my video, so much of our food relies on these creatures pollinating it every year. And what ends up happening with a species that is being manipulated over and over again by their genetics, as the honeybees are, it's gotten to a point where they can't function without human intervention. So this is like this very big crossroads that we're at. And thankfully, there are more farmers out there like myself and other small families that are trying to make their way into agriculture and practice regenerative farming. My vision for the world is, every city, every town has multiple small family farms that they can pull from, right? Localizing food back into your area as opposed to buying food from California when you're in Canada or Mexico. I mean, if I go to the grocery store here in Missouri, a lot of the things are coming from Mexico, right? Or Florida. So how can we move away from the global food network? And obviously this is like a very huge, huge undertaking. But the answers that scientists are proposing for some of this, the colony collapse, is, maybe you've seen it, is to create bees that are robots, little tiny robots flying around the world, around farms, I mean, not around the world, but implementing little tiny robots that go and pollinate our plants. Another solution that they think is a solution in China, this has already happened, where they hire farm workers to have a small paintbrush and a vial where they're going through the orchard and moving pollen by hand with a tiny brush and acting as pollinators. So we can see that obviously these are not solutions. And how do we move past these seemingly like quick answers, and when are we really going to, as a species, understand that this is not the direction for longevity or the future? So we're going to talk a little bit about native bees. We will dive more into native bees later on in the course. But native bees are also just as important to the environment as our honeybee friends. And for you as a bee guardian, it's really important that you advocate for not just the honeybees, but for the pollinators as well. And that includes our native bee friends. They are adorable, as you can see here. Some of the differences is, the main differences is that native bees are solitary. They don't live in hives like the honeybees do. And they have evolved with native plants to be efficient for those specific plant species. So yes, while honeybees are great pollinators for a lot of different crops, your native bees are really what are going to help stabilize your environment and also help your native plant life restore, if that's a project that you're working on. And this is in the background picture, this is a little nest of bumblebees. And most bees that are native bees are actually creating their nests in the soil. So we as bee guardians now are also, this other layer is that we are really care about soil health and how we treat our soil. How we are we stewards of a small piece of land. The was telling us about her garden and her farm that she had in Florida. Any of us, myself included, like, how am I treating the soil? Am I putting pesticides in there? Am I putting herbicides? I hope not, right? Because everything that we do has an impact in the environment, and the soil health really is at the foundation of all of this. So our native bees are finding homes in all kinds of things: hollow twigs, bamboo stalks, holes in bricks in your buildings, abandoned beetle burrows, wood piles, fallen tree branches, all kinds of things. Even if you have a small yard in a native, or excuse me, in the urban environment, I give a lecture often to local, like, small garden clubs. I talk about native bees and how you can lure them in. You can just have small piles of, twigs, branches, leaves. It doesn't have to be huge piles, but even small piles is enough to house some bees so that they can have a proper nest. And for those of us with a little bit larger pieces of land, I'm not raking my leaves like my front 5 acres, because I know that those are actual nests and sanctuaries for the native bees to overwinter. There's different levels of sociality that the bees have, ranging from solitary to eusocial. Those are just some terms for you to become familiar with. Solitary is like a mason bee, who a female will go and lay her eggs in the nest that she's made, and then take care of the eggs till they hatch. Those bees leave, and then they're off on their own, and they have their own, they create the same cycle over and over again. And aggregation talks about an area in an environment where there could be multiple solitary bee nests. A communal sociality is where bumblebees, you will find that, like that photo I showed, could have multiple bumblebee nests in a small area, and they could also have connecting tunnels, but they're not one organized hive. And then eusocial at the very opposite end is our honeybee colony or hive that works as a super organism so that they think and act like one being. And what do all bees eat? They eat pollen and nectar, which we're going to cover a lot of. But I love this photo. It shows the bees, the hair that they have on their bodies is really important. And also those pollen baskets in the back legs that she has, carrying lots of pollen back to the hive. So I encourage you, one of your assignments for this month is to do some research on what kind of native bees are in your area. And we're going to share this with each other. And I will make a note of what date to share. What date to share. But a good place to start is you can look up a local garden club or a local plant nursery that sells native plants. You can either visit, or oftentimes they usually have some resources online to, they share about what kind of species are in your area. But I would love for you to find which ones are very common and what plants are their preferred plants. That way you start becoming familiar, if you're not already, with some of these pollinating plants, of course, but also the other species that are in your environment. It's important to know because the honeybee is extremely, it has become extremely adapted to this territory, this continent. And some are arguing, some scientists and other environmentalists, that there could be a lot of competition between the honeybee and native bees. And this could be true in places where maybe the soil is not necessarily supported. There could be a lot of bare soil that's hard and rocky, that's hard for native bees to make habitat, but there could be flowering plants where the honeybees could be thriving. And as we've talked about, the native bees are really drawn to very specific plants. So if there aren't those available, obviously their population is not going to survive. And also, if there is some of those plants available and there's honeybees present, then we know that there might be some competition. I am of the perspective that nature finds a way to find balance. But obviously, there are many ways in which we can be supporting both types of bees, and that's by planting native plants in addition to our vegetables and our beloved flowers. But the conversation around native plant restoration is truly like deeply, deeply important, and it goes alongside soil health. It's very, very important. I have some students that took the class and, you know, ended up moving more in this direction of this kind of advocacy work. One of them works in a city council and really has educated the landscapers, the contractors of their city to be more focused on native plants and not bringing in, you know, exotics. So we all have this opportunity to really bring beautiful impact, positive impact. We just have to find a way. Some of the different types of native bees, there's sweat bees, mining bees, leaf cutter or mason bees, and then our big bumblebee and carpenter bees. They're all adorable. All of them are amazing. One great organization is called Xerxes, and I wonder if I have my chat. It's gonna let me chat. Okay. Xerxes. Oops. Xerxes. Come on. Don't auto-correct me. Xerxes is a organization that focuses on pollinators, but especially native pollinators. So I encourage you to look them up. How adorable are they? I mean, I just think they're so cute. And again, like they have all different adaptations for the plants that they're more specific for. Just adorable. And some of them are extremely small. And obviously some of them are very, very big, like bumblebees and carpenter bees. Something else that you're going to practice as spring comes is it a fly, a wasp, or a bee? There's many bee lookalikes, and this is just something fun for you to start practicing, especially with your kids. Which one is it? And this is good for you to, and just another avenue for you to kind of like immerse yourself at the insect level, which is like very like a micro level of looking at the world, right? Some differences. The bee, like a honeybee, they have back legs on their abdomen. Their morphology in a few minutes, but their legs dangle when they fly, and they also have wings that are specifically set on the thorax. And one of the differences also between a bee and a fly is that the flies have these like forward-facing eyes. They have one set of wings where bees have two. They don't really have hair like the bees do. And their antennae are usually like very stubby and short. And you won't see them collecting pollen. A wasp obviously is like much more long and narrow. They have this like little pinch between the thorax and the abdomen, and the patterning is usually very bright, and their colors are usually very like electric and neon. So again, we can see though that all of these are pollinators, and all of these are very important to the ecosystem. But this is a fun exercise for you to start looking towards for spring. Okay, so I will my presentation will be available for you. This slide is showing some of the books that I recommend you kind of onboard throughout the course. These are some of the websites. Again, I'll share this with you so you don't have to scramble to write all of it. But we're going to move to a different presentation here. And are there any questions right now, or comments or reflections, anything? Okie dokie. Okay. I do want to read something to you before we jump into this next part. One of my favorite books of all time, and it has to do with bees, is called The Song of Increase. The Song of Increase. I wrote it in the chat here. The author is Jacqueline Freeman, someone who I actually had the opportunity to study with and visit her apiary. She's an amazing human, and her book is basically a collection of her experiences with bees, but also excerpts on these topics from the bees themselves. So she was channeling the words of the bees and wrote them in this book. And it's very beautiful. It's I always encourage my students to pick it up so you can get it on Kindle really easily, but I'm also going to send you some excerpts as we go along. I'm going to read to you a little bit from the first chapter, and I will continue to read through it throughout the course. This is in the chapter, The Song of Unity, How Bees See Themselves, and the concept of the being. So I'm going to read a little bit here, see if you just want to like sit and receive. Science describes a honeybee hive as a superorganism, a single entity made up of tens of thousands of individuals working together and functioning as one living being. Thus, a honeybee is both an individual being and a cell in a larger being. Each bee is both particle and wave in the physics of its world. Some well-attuned apiculturists, such as Michael Thiele and Günter Hawk, who we're going to talk about, refer to the hive community with a more comprehensive German word called the Bienen. Besides having the qualities of the superorganism, the being includes the spiritual center and life force of the hive. Collectively, the being is conscious and alive, like a living brain, operating as a unified thought. The being is not just a hive, it is this hive in this particular and sacred place. The being also encompasses a relationship to place, light, seasons, and plants. With this holy landscape of the being, bees work with flowers, trees, minerals, water, and light, the full spectrum of creation, to bring about the highest good for our earthly environment. Unknown to most humans, bees also work intimately with the unseen realms of nature, nature, spirit, elementals, and fairies. All actions are both for the good of their singular being and for the unified consciousness of all beings everywhere. A single honeybee alone can't perform the many necessary survival tasks a bee needs to do, nor can a honeybee survive without its hive. If a foraging bee gets lost or trapped during her travel and stuck somewhere overnight, most likely she will perish by morning. Her death comes from the separation of the being. Each area of the hive and the tasks of all the bees depend upon each other for full expression. Bees understand that they do not exist as solitary beings, through they each have individual roles. Rather than saying they act in unison, like a group that works towards a common goal, they reference a larger perception of awareness. They are beings who carry memory and meaning through time. While each bee lives a short life, the hive itself continues on and carries the wholeness of its expression through time. They use the word memorist, which was new to me the first time I heard it, to describe the hive's collective memory. And then, in the bees' own words, this is what they say. A hive is a wholeness. One bee experiences all that every bee experiences. There is no separation. Whereas you have separation, we are born into a world beyond the borders of singularity. Our first thought is always of the hive, to bear increase into the world as we sing the world into aliveness. In a unity of purpose, bees have the fortitude and attention to meet each task with a steadiness of spirit. Each bee does the task at hand, doing what needs to be done to carry the hive into its fullness of being. We are not soloists, though. We each make our own sound. We are memorists who have remarkably retentive memories. We come to the hive and we are the hive. We sing our unity and then each take our song out into the world. We touch each flower and deliver the signature of our creation. After our touch, each plant has a rising helix, a chromatic cord that joins earth, matter, and ether. The fecundity of the atmosphere is thus enhanced and enlivened. Oh, there's much more to read, but there's this beautiful moment for us to imagine what a world would be like if we were operating in a form of unity. I think about this a lot, and I start kind of like in my own little bubble, like of my family, even just like within a family or even between two people, how challenging it can be to operate in like a unified effort, and to witness like a hive that is thousands of beings, how they're able to work together with this grace and this seamlessness. And it makes me think about the presence of ego and how humans are the ones with this ego, right? And what is it that we can learn from bees about ego ultimately? And how do we find our way outside of our solitary ego to operate in a hive of unity and consciousness? Does anyone want to share anything about that while I take a sip of water?
I couldn't agree more. As you were talking about the bees, I was like, well, it's because they don't have an ego. And we do. So it's a lot more challenging for us to step back and realize that we are all one. And yeah, bees kind of just have the upper hand.
Yes. Yeah, this is something that we'll continue to kind of question. It's an inquiry throughout the course that we'll come back to.
I have a connection to,
yeah.
Someone else say something? Or did I? No, okay. I thought I was speaking over someone there for a second. It's interesting because I won't share this the whole story right now, but again, like something that maybe down the road be interesting to share at some point is I have these dreams and I've had them for a while. And there have like periods of time in history, and they're always historical, and there's been some that have been very like powerful for me, and like life-changing kind of powerful for me. But in them, there's like one common thread, well, two things I was going to say, but one was, well, one thing is like I learned things that I didn't know before, and then I will like actually like Google things when I wake up and be like it's like very it's like information that like I didn't know even in my, like maybe I did in my subconscious on some level, but like information that I had no memory of ever acquiring. And these are like more like facts. But in the dream, the piece that's very like connected to what you're talking about is that we are telepathically connected. And it's usually in small villages. We usually know that there's a knowledge within the community that's that we're preserving, there's a detachment from it, even where sometimes there's an overlap. With one of the most powerful dreams, there was a really interesting overlap. But it's very surreal in that like we can literally feel each other's emotional responses, even though we can't physically see, but we can almost sense sometimes what people are looking at based on their bodies, because we're like just telepathic is the only word that it's different even than telepathy. It's like what you were just describing. So just felt like something to share, because there's I think this knowledge has been on Earth and is still on Earth. And it's actually like, it definitely in one of the dreams, I knew that I had come to this village and learnt how to do this again. It wasn't something that I was raised in it. I had been activated or that kind of something to feel that again. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Yes. The downloads that we'll get from each other will continue to happen when we're not in session together, and this will manifest in certain ways throughout our time together. I'm not going to put any other words on it, but much will be revealed. Okay. Let's go back to this these other slides I have for you for today.
Just want to mention, sorry to interrupt, just for the group's sake. I have family friends that are arriving. We haven't seen them in forever. And the lady is also a homesteader, an amazing woman. She might just pop in to watch the last half an hour, but I just felt like I should let the group know so that they're not like, now that we've formed this group, I felt like I needed to be respectful to mention that.
Yep. Okay. So we're going to get to know some of the Hive members, and I think that we won't get to equipment today. We might, but it might be next time. And I wonder if, I think I should do it this way. We'll talk about the queen and the maidens and the drones a little bit, and then I'll see if I can't squeeze in some time about the equipment, so you can start looking right now if you're wanting to get some hives, etc. So we'll do it this way. The queen, obviously, she is Mama, and she is there in the center of the picture, much larger than everyone else. She is the sole reproductive female of the hive, and she can lay up to 1,500 eggs a day. Typically will live anywhere between 1 and 5 years. And there's a lot of like speculation about what happens after a queen is born. We'll talk about how that happens specifically, but I would venture to say that there's, a lot of the beekeeping world, the conventional beekeeping world will argue that once there's a few virgin queens, once they're hatched at the same time that they fight to the death and cull each other, and the strongest one remains. But folks like Jacqueline, who wrote that book I just read to you, and some of my other mentors, they have a different perspective, that it's not necessarily very gruesome like that, and it could be actually very peaceful. I would also venture to say that that's probably true, as this is more of a matriarchal framework of living. I would venture to say that it's probably not like that at all. And there is more of a peaceful transition, I would say. And Jacqueline also says that she's seen, multiple queens in a hive at the same time, and that they're not like actively trying to destroy each other. So it's just something to think about. But a queen, she will start laying eggs shortly after she mates with drones, and I'll show you how that happens in a moment. But she is really the glue that holds everyone together. She is not necessarily giving orders and bossing the bees around, but it's her presence that is the anchor for the hive. And if she's not there, then the hive is unable to function. And these are female bees, they're not male. As so many people initially think, the industrious, hardworking characteristic is, I guess, more attached to a masculine energy, but in fact, the females are the ones that are doing all the work inside of the hive. They do everything from feeding the bees, the babies, to cleaning the hive, to foraging. There could be up to 60,000 or more, depending on how big the hive is. And they are following each other's pheromones through scent and communication, and communicating constantly that way, also through dance and touching. And collectively, they just have this innate knowing of what needs to be done next and what's happening around them. They don't have the same reproductive system like the queen does, which we'll explore more later. They live about 4 to 6 weeks in the summertime and can live longer in the winter. And then our drones, so you could call them the father bee or the brother bee. The drone is in the center of that photo. He has much larger eyes than the workers, and he's much larger in body. But his main purpose is for mating with new queens, and for sharing his genetic lineage with as many other hives as possible in the environment. So some of the differences between queens and maidens, they all eggs get the same diet of royal jelly in the first 3 days. And maybe you have had royal jelly before as like a supplement or within one of your beauty products. But it's a very special concoction made by the bees, and it comes from their mandibles that they secrete all kinds of proteins and enzymes and things like that that are needed for the egg properly into a larva. And then if the opportunity has arisen for a new queen to be raised, they will continue to feed that larva the royal jelly diet. And those special proteins give her the ability to develop the reproductive organs that she needs. And if the other eggs are meant to be workers, then they get a reduced diet that doesn't have the royal jelly anymore. So the workers, the maiden bees, also have ovaries, but they cannot fertilize an egg. So when they lay an egg, it just ends up being a drone. Whereas the queen has the opportunity and the ability to decide if she wants to lay an egg that's a maiden or drone at any given time. And she does that by signaling her body to pull a sperm and an egg and lay a fertilized egg. So the action of swarming is really this beautiful birth of the hive. And it is one of like the most beautiful things to witness. Have any of you seen a swarm happen? No? Okay. It is really spectacular. I'll show you a video probably next time, but it is really the birth of the new hive. What ends up happening is if you have a hive with an older queen and she may be aging or got sick or is, something happened to her, the hive will know that it's time to raise the new queen. So they will signal for her to leave the hive, and she'll take with her a couple thousand bees, and they will go and land somewhere else. And that original hive will then raise a new queen. And you can see those in the bottom right photo, these little like peanut shaped cups. Those are called queen cells. And a new queen will be raised, and that's how they essentially give birth to a new hive. One of the things that we promote in natural beekeeping is to allow the hive to swarm as many times as it wants. And that seems like a no-brainer, but in conventional beekeeping, it's really encouraged to prevent swarming, given that every time the hive will swarm, it takes a portion of bees with it. And that means like less population in your original hive to do things like create honey. So we allow the bees to swarm whenever they need to, because they know, like, obviously, they're the ones that would know if the queen is not well, or they also do this if there's disease within the hive. So it allows them to manage the health of the hive in certain ways, which we'll explore more later. And then the actual mating that takes place is pretty amazing. A queen is born, and probably the next day she flies up in the air to a spot where she knows there are a lot of drones. She mates with as many of them as possible and takes in all of that genetic material into this tiny little organ that she has in her body. And that's where she stores all of the sperm. In that bottom photo, you can see an egg coming out. So after she's done that, she spends the rest of her life inside of the hive. She never leaves again unless she's swarming. What's fascinating also is that the drone dies after he mates with a queen. Like his whole like phallus is ripped out, and he dies. So there's a lot to unpack there, which we'll do later. But this is sort of one of the beautiful things that happen in springtime. There's a lot of that going on, and it usually is about high in the air because they, for whatever reason, pick a spot up there, not low to the ground, not in the trees. I'm going to see, we have 10 minutes left. I want to show you some of the different hive designs so that you can start thinking about what that looks like. And we'll go back and cover how to get your bees. But for now, let's just look a little bit at the hive design.
We can't hear you. No, I still can't hear you. No.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you for letting me know. Okay, so you can still see the screen?
Yes.
Suits and gloves? Okay, thank you. Okay, so obviously you're going to need a suit and some gloves. And I recommend you have a full suit before you embark on taking on a half suit, like I have in the photo there. Full suit just helps you acclimate to the experience of being amidst thousands of bees, gives you that a little bit more security. And then the gloves are important. I prefer like a leather glove, and initially. Over time, you'll be probably more comfortable to venture into beekeeping without any gloves on. And then you'll move into maybe just a veil, like the bottom picture shows, just to cover your face. And that's great. That's like the journey that you can have. And as you feel more comfortable, you can start to take more of those layers off. But there's also full suits available for children so that they can be involved and share in that process with you. The hand tools that you need are not that many, but there is a smoker and there's different types of fuel that you'll put in the smoker. I'll cover more of that later, but it's, I use like dried herbs. I use burlap, things that are natural. You need something called a hand tool, which is this mini little J hook or crowbar. You'll see brushes being sold like that bottom or top right photo. And instead of a brush, you can also use a feather, like a long turkey feather or a long hawk feather. The purpose of the brush is to help move the bees when you're either looking or to move them off of a frame when you're harvesting something. A steel bucket that you can carry to put your smoker in when you're not using it so you don't catch anything on fire. A long lighter, and sometimes you can use a clamp to gather frames, but you don't need that necessarily right away. I bring my drum with me. If you have a drum, I bring it to the hive, and aside from doing inspections, I like to sit with the hive and play music for them. So you can do this or not do this. It's your own adventure, but they love the sound of a low medicine, for example, I have here. And they really respond to that resonance. I have a picture here of some salves that I make, but the point of this picture is to also incorporate minerals. If you work with the mineral world, any kind of crystals or any mineral. I keep minerals in the apiary, and I also grid the apiary. So you can do that as well, if that's something that you practice. They really respond to rose quartz, and maybe your hive will respond to something else, but that's something you can bring in. Here's another, I also have like, obviously altars everywhere. So I incorporate elements, the 4 elements in an altar at the hives too, just so that there's like a full integration of that. Okay, hive designs. So we have a few more minutes. I'll go through this quickly and again, send you some more info. But if you want to start with like the most common one, and that's totally fine if you want to, you can still do natural beekeeping in this way. This is the pretty standard hobby beekeeper design. It's called a Langstroth box. If you do go this route, I encourage you to not do plastic foundations. As you can see in this photo, there's these frames that go inside the box, but choose frames that don't have any plastic on them. We don't want plastic inside of the hive. Always choose materials that are more natural. There's many pros and cons to the Langstroth box that we'll talk about later.
but this is the most like economical, also the easiest to work with in your first year, and easiest to order. So I'll leave it there. You can choose.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So if I had started already with the plastic foundation,
yes,
what's the best way to move forward without using them?
Yeah, you know, over time, after a couple of years, the comb ends up getting really dark. And as the bees start to cycle through the frames, you can start to take them out and replace them with frames that don't have that plastic foundation. You can choose frames that have foundation with wax, but I prefer frames that have no foundation whatsoever to allow the bees to build however they want. So if you're opening your box and you're looking and you're seeing that there's not that much happening in that comb, like there's no honey or no larva, go ahead and take it out and put a new one in, and you can just go one by one over time.
Okay.
And if you need to add another box, like they're ready for expansion, then just have that whole next box without the plastic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you can choose to build them out yourself. These are the frames. I highly recommend that. You can go either way. It's very time consuming, a very time consuming process, but you can do it if you want to. It saves you some money as opposed to buying them prefabricated and assembled already. So it just takes a while. So many pieces. You basically need a staple gun and some nails and a hammer, and then the wiring process is a little bit extensive. So this is what we mean by a frame. Those are frames that sit inside of the box. The frame is where the bees build these layers of comb. And when we talk about foundationless, we talk about a frame that has only wire and not any kind of foundation. And the reason why we promote that is so that the bees build the wax the way they want to. They build the comb the way they want to, okay? And this is like some more dimensions. The other major option that you can try, and then I'm gonna wrap it up after this, is called the top bar hive or a horizontal hive. So this would be a design that, let me see if I can show you. This is looking from the top. It only has bars that sit on the top of the hive, and the bees are allowed to build the wax the way they want to. And this is a more natural way. It's more in alignment with how they normally build out. These are more expensive, the top bar hive. But if you're really committed to, working with bees in the most natural setting, but also want to harvest honey and things like that, this would be the route to take. Let's see if I can show you. Yeah, that's about it. This is what it looks like from the top. And you will learn how to work in both situations, learn how to work with both designs. So we're out of time here, but I want to say, start to research the Langstroth and also the top bar and see how those resonate with you. I'm going to send you some more resources as well, and for you to continue to make that decision the way that you want to. And yeah, before we close, do you have any questions or comments or anything for now?
I have a question. The top bar shape kind of reminds me of those upside down baskets.
Oh, yes.
That made of wood. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is. It's the same concept. So the skep is it's the same concept where they're building on the inside and they're going to build in those rounded combs. But with the top bar, you're given the opportunity to manipulate the comb. Yeah. With the basket, if the skep, it's just kind of folks who want to have hives around them will choose the skep route. You can harvest honey occasionally, but obviously it's not like conducive to really getting in there, harvesting a lot of honey. The top bar hive, you can harvest a lot of honey because they'll continue to build out in the space as big as they get. So yes, you're right.
Yeah. And then for me, because we have bears, those seem easier to put higher up and work with that, you know, where I guess, well, our bears climb trees too, but I don't know if they can climb a pole. But it seems like I can hang them on poles or something.
The skeps, yes, you could. I would also say that with bears, like you have to get a little bit more aggressive in your apiary. We'll talk about that, but most people choose to have some kind of electric fencing around the hives because bears they will get what they want. And in your case, the Langstroth box, the first box I showed, might be the easiest in terms of protecting them. They can sit lower to the ground. You can strap them up really easily and also put electrical wiring around. The top bar hive sits on stilts, so it becomes a little bit more flimsy and is easier to open. It's not as easy to like secure them. So some things to think about. We'll talk more, but yeah, I would consider the electrical for sure. And it doesn't have to be extensive, right? Like there's usually just three wires around posts.
Yeah. The homestead around here, they have 2 hives, and they showed me their little setup because the raccoons too can get to them. Yeah.
And you're asking about the rain suits. Can they use those with a veil? I don't know.
Yeah, you know, the full, like tough, you know what I mean? It kind of looks like a jumpsuit, like coveralls.
No. The material's too thin. If they get stung, it'll go through pretty easily.
Okay.
I have another quick question.
Yeah.
So we have had a lot of rain in Southern California the last month.
Yes.
And I haven't really checked on my bees since the rain. And I'm a little bit worried to, you know, I don't know, did the water get inside the hive? What do you have to say about that?
Yeah. Rain is, thank you, Joel. Thank you. Rain is a big thing. I would recommend you get a roof on them, like get some siding or something water resistant so that all of that rain is not settling on top of the hive, like the lid all the time. And then pick a day where it's above like 65 degrees. I don't know what the weather has been like, but pick a day where there's warmer temperature so you can go in and take a peek.
Okay.
Yeah. But
maybe today it might be a good day because I'm feeling a little bit more confident.
Yeah, go take a look and definitely get some rain protection on there so it's not like soaking them all the time. Unfortunately, like when it is raining, they can't fly out. So I don't know, has it been raining recently?
Not since the last 4 days.
Okay, so then they've been out and active. So yeah, if it's warm, go and take a look and just see what's going on. And definitely get a roof on them because you have more rain coming for sure.
So when I do go take a look, I need to get my smoker.
Yeah. Put your suit on, get your smoker, and just take a peek. You don't have to take anything out really. Just look from above and see how many bees you see on top. That will tell you like how big, you know, the population is, right? Like how many frames you see of bees. And if you have questions after you go look, you can send me an email and we can troubleshoot anything that comes up.
Okay.
Yeah. Take some pictures if you can on a tripod.
Are there any hives in particular that you'd recommend for high windy areas? Like we get a lot of wind here.
Yeah, well, The cool thing is that you could do any of those designs, but you could put some effort into making a windbreak. I've had a lot of clients that, you know, live in drafty, windy areas. And so they would create a windbreak by having some wood fencing, for example, or just something to shelter the bees a little bit. So that would be something to consider. You can also pick a spot where maybe they're on the other side of a tree trunk or a wall. You know, the top bar hive, again, because it's on stilts, it's a little top heavy, so it's not as easy to stabilize that one. The Langstroth, again, can be lower to the ground, can be strapped a little bit easier. But with all of them, you could definitely create a nice nook for your apiary and use whatever materials you have. Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk about like picking your apiary site too. Okay. Well, thank you for our first session. Yay, that was amazing. Thank you so much for being here. And I'll see you, I think it's the 12th. We'll talk about medicine and plants and all kinds of yummies. I'll send you a follow-up email, and I wish you a great weekend.
I am seeing you again for the second session, correct? For my
if you want to, it's gonna, I mean, we're gonna do everything in this session, in this class.
Yeah, I think it's probably better if I just stick to this one. Yeah. All right.
All right. Thank you.
Nice meeting all of you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.